Drop kick me, Jesus, through the goalposts of life.
Well, welcome back, Doug Pagitt Radio on AM 950, 11:21, 21 minutes after the hour here, Sunday morning, January 10th, edition of Doug Pagitt Radio. Having a conversation with Dr. Andrew Root. I called you Andy. That's all right, though?
Oh, that's fine.
When we're just on the radio, you can be Andy. When it's just
That's right, yeah.
just the two of us.
Right, of course.
Building castles way up high.
Right.
Dr. Andrew Root is the professor of youth ministry at Luther Seminary. Luther Seminary is a graduate school teaching people religion and church-like skills in St. Paul at luthersem.edu. And Andy has written a number of books. He's going to be hosting an event March 1 through 3 called First Third. It's for people who are in doing ministry and work with adolescents on the role of theological reflection, theological practice in youth ministry. So you can find out details about that over at andrewroot.com and also at firstthird.org.
Andrewroot.org.
andrewroot.org.
Yeah,
Do you not have andrewroot.com?
No, well, I think some real estate exec in Arizona or something had that. So
okay, little tip, folks. If you ever buy a .com, also buy the .org. Like, why didn't this guy buy the .org?
I don't know.
It's just $14 a year.
I know, but it makes me feel less important that I have to
you're
be
the
.org.
Yeah. A lot of people have to go .net too, and then .tv.
I did buy that one when I
You did buy .net. See, Andrew knows what's going on. Okay, so I had said before the break, hey, let's talk a little bit here about the legitimacy of adolescent ministry. Okay, so like when someone's an adolescent, right? They're biologically, there's a sociological category that means you still live at home or you're going to college or blah blah blah.
Right.
And people are suggesting this extended adolescence into the mid-20s because you get the boomerang kids that move back home and all that business. Not just sociologically as a category, because I think that's a very 20th and 21st century category to have adolescence. In most parts of the world, you're functioning as an adult, sometimes from your mid-teens sort of forward. Mm-hmm. But there is something biological and neurological going on with the human brain up until someone's 23, 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there. And there's still a real developmental sense that's going on. And a lot of ministry, a lot of religious ideas and all this stuff requires a certain integration of thought. Right, you have to think abstractly. You have to think concretely. You have to think spatially. There's a lot that goes on when someone says, "Let's think about God and God's place." Like that just kind of gets you. That's a big deal. So, is it legitimate to be trying to do sort of sophisticated ministry with people whose brains are still being awash in the chemicals of development and adolescence?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's two ways that you can really go at it. One is to simply say no, so don't ever do it. Or the other is to say maybe not, so just make it sophisticated babysitting. And what the youth ministry should then be at the church is kind of adolescent babysitting that works on moral behavior to keep kids from being pregnant and drunk, and then you hope. At the end of the day, that's all it is. And you hope that the youth ministry serves as a billboard to get families to come to a church so you can have more membership and maybe more giving units, as some churches will say. Yeah. So you could say...
That sounds even worse.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. So you could say that, but I think my argument would actually be that it isn't about integration at all, and that actually doing significant theological reflection in youth ministry and with adolescents is actually dealing with the perplexity and their doubt. And that's where it actually starts. And that, these are young people, and we can have a conversation about whether culture determines biology or biology determines culture. I mean, I think the fact that we have a high school and they're a marketing niche, I think that forms their brains more than we probably give credit for. That culture has a way of forming the organism, our biological organism. Sure. But I think it comes down to the point that if it really is about integrating everything for them so that they graduate from high school and they have this full-fledged kind of round, bounceable, completely whole understanding of God, self, world, then we're in for a lot of disappointment because that's not going to happen.
You can't get there from here.
You can't get there. Yeah. And they're going to go to college. But usually what we do is we take the kids who can play that game and can say, oh, I got it. And then we say, oh, those are the kids that have really been affected by our ministry. Yeah. Where there's the kids who are more dark than we're comfortable with, who have these deep questions, who are always confronting us with these scary issues.
Yeah, or just complete knuckleheads.
Or they just simply can't sit still. And we
Right.
look at those kids and are like, oh gosh, I hope God does something in their life.
Yeah.
But maybe what ministry is actually about is working with them in the midst of the incongruity and the big, deep existential questions they have. Maybe that's actually where ministry with adolescents starts.
Yeah, right.
Instead of trying to make them whole into something, it's trying to search for God up against their inconsistencies and their yearnings and their questions. So you have a kid who breaks up with their boyfriend after going out for 2 weeks,
Well,
and
that sounds great.
and they're crying, and you think, my God, you're so stupid. Like you're
Yeah.
not going to care about this
Right,
person
right.
in a year for sure, if not in a week. But one way to look at it is to think, well, I hope that they find Jesus, and I hope that they realize Jesus should be more important than the person that they date.
Yeah, right,
Or
right.
else that could be
priority problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a priority problem. If they really love Jesus, then they wouldn't even care about dating.
Yeah.
Instead of maybe looking at it and taking those feelings of rejection or those feelings of just breakup and loss, and making those the location to start thinking about where is God, who is
Yeah.
God. So I think the way to do it with adolescents is to embrace the chaos of their lives and make the chaos the very place where we start doing reflection on who God is.
Yeah, the thing I like about what you've done and what you're doing with First Third and the way that you address this, which I think is refreshing in how a lot of people think about teenagers, is that you acknowledge that this is the starting point, not the finishing point. And there's a number of pressures in our society to assume that when a kid is 18, high school graduate, 18 years old, that you're sort of done at that point. So there's kind of a pressure to say, well, we have to sort of evaluate at that moment where they are and what we've accomplished. And when youth ministries do this, like, I want to accomplish these goals in a kid's life before they get out of high school. I mean, I think you're rightly saying, no, this is the start. It's not the finish. And if a church has the idea that we want to confirm a kid when they're 13 and then develop them by the time they're 18 and then have them ready to go and sent out the door, sort of tested and ready, or high school or parenting when a kid moves out. Yeah. So there's a lot of parenting, and all the professionals that work with adolescents have to recognize, no, the measurement comes 10 years down the road.
Right. And the truth is it's an illusion, if not a delusion, to assume that even adolescents at 18 you're done. And in the sense that even someone who's 35 or 40, their life is more chaotic and it feels more out of control and more transitional than we like to admit. So it really is kind of a delusion of kind of middle class America.
Yeah, so maybe we're never done.
I don't think we're ever done.
Yeah.
And so the process with adolescents is to start seeking for God in the midst of their own chaos and their own suffering and their own longing now, because maybe they'll be able to do that when they're adults.
Because they'll keep it going.
Yeah, and I think that's where youth ministry becomes significant.
Yeah, and that's what I think people like you who are suggesting to the professionals around adolescents to say, don't you give these false lines like this is the greatest time of your life and you're never going, you're going to look back on all this and it's sort of coming to an end now. That whole thing, which happens to people who are in industries, education and parenting and youth ministry, can sort of put that pressure like you're kind of done with my part in your life. So maybe you're done with everything. Well, that's Dr. Andrew Root. Some of us call him Andy Root over at Luther Seminary. You can find that at luthersem.edu and andrewroot.org and firstthird.org. Lots of ways to get a hold of them. A good conversation going on in March as well. Andy, thanks for being on the show. Doug Pagitt Radio, religious radio that's not quite right on AM 950.
Rises upright.